at the international organizations, IAEA being one of them. The point is that, yes, we are outraged. Our people are really unhappy and angry about the IAEA's position and Board of Governors resolution against Iran that provided a basis for the Israeli regime's attack against Iranian's nuclear facilities. At the same time, we have serious criticism about IAEA DG's role regarding the last report that he produced regarding Iran's nuclear program. While he knew that Iran's nuclear program was totally peaceful, he admitted in his interview with CNN that they had no clue or indication or proof that Iran's nuclear program was moving toward weaponization. In his report, he put certain concepts that provided a pretext for the E3 and US to craft a resolution that was eventually used as a pretext for Israeli and American attacks against our nuclear program. The other point is that it was our expectation, our modest expectation from the IAEA, from the DG, from the Board of Governors to unequivocally, unambiguously condemn the Israeli and American attack on our peaceful nuclear facilities. That was not done, and we still expect them to do so because it is part of their responsibility to react towards such injustices, towards such unlawful aggression and attacks against our nuclear program. It's only few days after they attack our nuclear facilities. So our Atomic Energy Organization is working very hard to see what has happened. It's, at the end of the day, it's for them to describe the situation and to tell us what has happened and how seriously our nuclear facilities have been damaged. Yes, I can tell you that the level of damage has been high, but the details should be provided by our Atomic Energy Organization, hopefully.
We welcome our Deputy Secretary General. She is here to launch the report by the Secretary General's expert group on debt entitled Confronting the Debt Crisis, 11 Actions to Unlock Sustainable Financing. You will hear from the Deputy Secretary General. You will also hear from Mahmoud Mohieddin, Special Envoy on Financing for the 2030 Agenda. Also present virtually is Rebecca Greenspan, who you all know as the Secretary General of UN Trade and Development. Paolo Gentiloni, the former EU Commissioner for Economy. Trevor Manuel, former South African Finance Minister, should also be online, as well as Yan Wang, the Senior Researcher at Boston University's Global Development Center. They will all be able to answer your questions, but we'll start with the Deputy Secretary General. Please.
Good afternoon to everyone. Earlier this week, I had the pleasure of being here and briefing on the upcoming Financing for Development Conference in Seville. But today I want to talk about the headline issue of the conference, which will be debt. 10 years after countries adopted the SDGs, development, of course, faces many headwinds. It's slowing global growth, the threat of trade war and repeated global shocks in climate and conflict. But the most unsettling challenge for many developing countries is the debt crisis. Borrowing is critical for development, we all know that, and it does provide a means to governments to invest boldly in a better future for their people. But it is especially critical at a time when all countries are required to undertake one-off generational investments to green their economies and to build critical infrastructure. Today, borrowing is not working for many developing countries. Over 2/3 of our low-income countries are either in debt distress or at a high risk of it. 3.4 billion people live in countries that spend more on interest payments than on health or on education. And the debt crisis is a silent crisis in two respects. First, the crisis doesn't impact the lives or economies of those in advanced economies. The immediate effects of the crisis are contained and they don't necessarily threaten the stability of the global financial markets. But second, among global policymakers, there's a striking reluctance to allow or acknowledge the crisis for what it is, perhaps driven by an increasingly unlikely hope that the problem will solve itself if interest rates come down. This is why the Secretary General appointed an expert group in December to try to identify solutions to end the silent crisis and to make foreign work for development, sustainable development. Today we publish their recommendations. Their report makes a case that an end to the debt crisis is entirely feasible if opportunities are seized. The experts identify a collection of actions that are not only moonshots but politically and technically viable. The actions are aimed both at delivering short-term impact and relieving pressures on indebted countries and long-term change by expanding access to long-term affordable financing. The actions that are proposed by the experts reinforce the commitments put forward in the Seville outcome document, which world leaders will discuss in Seville next week. It offers a chance to change course and to break the debt cycle once and for all. On behalf of the SG, I would like to sincerely thank the 4 members of the expert group, and I hope that we have them online: Paolo Gentilini, Trevor Manuel, Mahmoud Mohdin and Yang Wang, and Mahmoud has been leading this group. We look forward to continuing to work with them on the implementation of the proposals, and I do want to express deepest appreciation to our sister, UNCTAD, also led by Rebecca Greenspan, has been pulling together the system, providing secretariat for this to happen. I'd now like to turn to Mahmoud to take us through the 11 recommendations that have been made by the experts.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I hope that you can hear me well.
Perfectly.
Thank you so much. Consultations of the 54 countries of Africa are today not low-income countries, but middle-income countries.
No, but that's fine. There was a message.
Sorry. Rebecca, I think your microphone is on. Please go ahead, Mahmoud.
Thank you. And in addition to that, we provided some practical suggestions, and perhaps our good co-chair, Yan Wang, can elaborate on that, some specific goals related to the debt sustainability framework applied by the IMF and the World Bank, not just to low-income countries, which is currently under the by the two institutions, but to consider reform on the debt sustainability for market access countries and countries. We propose as well some actions to come to the unutilized PPR, which are very big, and this is included in the outcome document. And by the way, every measure that we are proposing is fully aligned with the outcome document, and this is what we are and implementing. But please as well that through the at the international cooperation level, including the emphasis that we have to put on areas related to regional collaboration, South-South cooperation, North-South cooperation. We are putting some specific measures, including the operationalization of the good suggestion of having a platform or a forum or a club for the borrower or debtors for knowledge sharing, technical assistance, collaboration, and enhancing the role of the borrower, especially with international financial institutions. There are many other proposals, including methods related to providing support for dealing with debt swaps and not to deal with them. And by verifying the loan is related to what the country themselves have. We know very well that they need a big problem to sort out the issue of the creditors very much responsible for the crisis that we're in. We lend the country while we know that there is a good deal of possibility to support and to provide the credit at a high interest rate and to reduce the rate in time of crisis. But the borrowers as well, many of them borrowed short-term with the general consumption of the capital and interest. Management unit. In addition to that, lowering the transaction cost when it comes to some innovative financial solutions, including debt swaps. They are all reflected in detail in the proposal, and I'm happy that we get the opportunity during the Seville conference to discuss each and every one of these proposals in detail. And I wonder if you have an opportunity for Rebecca, Yan, and Paula
Thank you very much. I'll now turn to Rebecca Greenspan. Please, Rebecca, go ahead. Rebecca, we cannot hear you. So Rebecca, we're gonna come back to you. We'll come back to you. We'll take a question. Well, go ahead, Edith.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association and to all of you for doing this briefing. Have you had any indication from the United States on replenishing the international financial institutions and reforming them to make them more inclusive?
Please. that? Or?
No, we didn't really get directly in touch with the U.S. authorities, but we referred here to the board of the multilateral and we referred to the board of the IAEA. And the case of the IAEA is the catastrophe trust fund, and the case of the World Bank is the debt reduction. In the case of the International Bank, and I was in touch with the ACCC, with the African Development Bank, and with the Islamic Development Bank, and we share their interest in exploring options to support decisions, not single country decisions. And I hope, given the merits of the proposal, that should be the matter of these institutions. And as you may know, I served at the World Bank for 10 years and the IMF board for 4 years. So I know there is some sort of collective interest in this matter, as will have happened before, like the issuance of SDRs, reducing the fuel charges of lending. This could happen. So actually, as hinted by the DSG, that we are going to be working closely with these institutions, management and board, to make sure that these solutions are going to be applicable. One more thing, the Jubilee report read by Professor Lou Stiglitz, Martin Guzman, and 30 top economists, many of them have been affiliated with the IMF and the World Bank, have similar proposals. So I'm sure that through closer collaboration with them, we can reach a good outcome that we are seeking. And again, that these proposals are tested technically and politically, so they should be proven and agreed with when we are communicating them to the relevant
Before we go more questions, let's try Rebecca again, and then Mr. Gentiloni. Rebecca, let's try it again.
Yes, do you hear me now? Yes? Do you?
Go ahead.
DSG and the DSG for making this silent crisis visible. The situation has deteriorated from last year to this year, and that's why this is so important with respect to the FFD4. Let me give only 3 numbers to you. The global debt crisis has been last year, 3.3 million people were in countries like the DSG said that spend more on interest payments than on health or education. This year, that number is 3.4 billion. Last year, developing countries paid $847 billion in debt service. This year is 921 billion. And last year, the financing gap to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals was approaching 4 trillion. This year, it has surpassed that mark. So these are not only worsening numbers, this is development going backwards. And hurting the economy. And that's why, as you said, and as explained, it's so important to bring the FFD4 that is an outcome document that provides us possibility really to be able to make these practical, political, viable solutions that the group of experts have proposed. These are 11 proposals that are doable, and that we need the political will of all the actors to be able to make them real. And really thank you for the opportunity of ANCA to support this group, but really kudos to the 4 experts and to the
very much. We'll now turn to Mr. Gentiloni. Can you please go ahead? Thank you very much. We'll return back to questions. Gabriel, please.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you very much for the briefing. Ms. Deputy Secretary General, I was really struck when you were talking about 3.4 billion people around the world that live in countries that spend more on debt servicing than they do on health or education. I mean, that shows that there are real people behind these numbers being affected by it. And on that note, I just wanted to ask you two things. One is, can you kind of characterize your talk with creditors, your negotiations with creditors, because they hold so much power in this equation? How do you convince them to cooperate and see in their best interest that this would benefit them as well to cooperate on policy coordination? And the second one is, I'll ask it kind of a journalistic style, so if it please when you're in Sevilla, if a world leader pulls you aside privately and says, Ms. Mohammed, in my country, we are paying more in debt servicing than we are for health or education. Do you recommend that we default on our debt? What would you say?
Okay, well, let me start with the last question. Absolutely no, don't default on your debt if you can help it. I mean, the most important thing is to maintain the credibility of commitments that one has made when one takes loans and you need to pay them off. And it does have a big impact on how you're viewed. And unfortunately, even though the circumstances are difficult, the way in which you are rated and seen with default is worse than it is better. But this is what we're trying to avoid. So back to the first question, what we do with creditors is not to get to that point in the first place. And these 11 recommendations are what are feasible. They're not new, but quite frankly, they are ones that now perhaps some have come of age. The pressure, the face that we want to put to heads of state, to creditors, when they're facing choices that they have to make at the boards, the policy decisions they have to make. So that you in your country would not give up health or education. It's a choiceless choice for a leader to have, and it's not that we went into bad debt. That debt became that way because there were a number of contingencies which they didn't have any control over. So I think making the case and showing that there are solutions. So it's not just about agonizing and being frustrated about it. We put 11 recommendations here, proposals here that can actually be had, including putting together a forum where debt can be discussed and a voice can be raised, and we can move on in many of the frameworks and platforms that there are. So that's no to debt default, and certainly to do more to make the case, and this report does that. And this is what the SG wanted. What can we do tangibly? Because there is a loss of confidence in the system, that we continue to attend this forum, these meetings, be part of these institutions, and yet the suffering is not anything that is getting better, it's getting worse. The stats are getting worse. The ability for countries to come forward and solve these problems less and less.
Any of our panelists want to add anything?
dealing with issues related to trade. But here we are trying to be narrowly focused in everything related to debt relief and to prevention of the crisis. So the specific two questions, let me just add, and I totally agree with the DSP that have two answers. But I would like to say, it's very much country-specific issues. There is no general theory of debt management and debt restructuring. There are good examples that we have seen recently from the debt restructuring of Ghana. And recently we have seen Ghana trying by a regulating agency and disability is coming back to the market after a recent update by the rating agency. That was through agony and tough reform. In other cases, the Americans have been praised recently after the complicated, the tough discussions that have been praised by the Iranian. But again, come through political will and take the control. We're not encouraging countries to default. It's basically a case by case. But what I'm saying is better ways of better ways of bringing finance to development. There are better ways of making finance, and this is basically one of the options. When it comes to complications, than education and health. I wouldn't say education or health. In some cases, we had education and health put together in addition to essential services being spent over less than interest payments, not the whole debt service. So this is really a kind of a realistic approach to the crisis that has been evolving for quite some time.
Thank you very much. Dulcie?
Yes, I wanted to ask the ESG about the U.S. Was this withdrawal expected, or was this a surprise?
I can say it wasn't a surprise. I think we continue to engage certainly member states through the whole process. At the end, it wasn't possible to keep them in the room and have them sign on. But we continue this engagement. Many of the recommendations you see cannot be pursued without a continuous engagement with the US. So not a surprise, unfortunate, and we continue to engage to get them back in.
So are they planning to come back in, or is it a dead end?
I don't think it's a dead end. Nothing ever is a dead end. That's what we do here to make sure that doesn't happen. For now, they will not be at Seville, and they have not participated in the Seville consensus. But when you see the recommendations in this report, they are wide and they are deep, and they are, as the Mahmoud has said, a package that will end up in the domain where the US identifies where these discussions will be had, and we will continue to encourage them to join those discussions.
Great. Thank you. Well, Rebecca, did you have something or no?
Yeah, can I add something very important that Mahmoud and the DSG have said? You know, in the countries have the Chapter 11, for example, in the US, that is for companies not to die, but to be able to restructure their debt so they can continue their activities. And nobody says that Chapter 11 is to help countries to default or to companies to default in that case. The same here. You know, no country, as the DSG said, wants to default. But if there are issues that have systemic issues that have made it impossible to be able to sustain the level of debt that they have, so there are here solutions and improvements that can be made to have a mechanism for an orderly and responsible way to restructure the debt. And let's remember that many of the countries that are in debt today are in debt distress because there was COVID and there was a high interest rate in countries that have reserve currency. And there was the inflation crisis and shock over them. So there were a lot of systemic shocks. So what the DSG is saying and what we are saying in the report is that there has to be an institutional mechanism that will allow countries to be responsible and at the same time to be able to restructure their debt. And there are very specific solutions or fixing to fix the G20 common framework that are presented by the experts, like expanding access to middle-income countries, introducing automatic debt standstill, ensuring official and private creditors engage in parallel, not sequentially, in the negotiations. So there are very specific solutions to make this work for everybody. So let me just emphasize that having a restructuring debt mechanism or a better mechanism to restructuring the debt you cannot say that if you have that, you are encouraging countries to default. Countries never want to default. It's a very painful process.
To all panelists, and then just one last announcement that today is our Deputy Secretary General's birthday. So and Rebecca, you get a prize for your Anna Wintour pin. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mahmoud, Paolo. I can see Wanki there, and Rebecca. There's been incredible work that has been done in a very short space of time, but you built on extensive issues that have been on the table for a very long time, and I think you've just brought them to fruition. Now there's no reason not to act on them. So thank you. Second 11. First 11.
We welcome our Deputy Secretary General. She is here to launch the report by the Secretary General's expert group on debt entitled Confronting the Debt Crisis, 11 Actions to Unlock Sustainable Financing. You will hear from the Deputy Secretary General. You will also hear from Mahmoud Mohideen, the Special Envoy on Financing for the 2030 Agenda. Also present virtually is Rebecca Greenspan, who you all know as the Secretary General of UN Trade and Development, Paolo Gentiloni, the former EU Commissioner for the Economy, Trevor Manuel, former South African Finance Minister, should also be online, as well as Yan Huang, the Senior Researcher at Boston University's Global Development Center. They will all be